The Untold Story of the 10-year-old serial killer, Mary Bell. When the word serial killer is mentioned, many cruel things come to mind, but never a 10-year-old child. Children have popularly been associated with being pure and harmless. However, that isn't always the case, and it wasn't the case with Mary Bell. Welcome back to the Crime Lab channel, the place where you find the truth about crime stories. In today's video, we'll be looking at the story of Mary Bell, the second youngest murderer in history. Mary Bell was born on May 26, 1957, in Scotswood, a metropolitan neighborhood in the West End region of Newcastle upon Tyne. She was an unwanted and neglected child born to irresponsible parents. She was the second child of a 17-year-old prostitute, Betty. Due to the nature of her job, her mother was not always present. She often traveled out of the country to New York, leaving Mary with her father, who was barely present. Mary's mother had been trying to get rid of her since birth, so it wasn't any better even when she was present. Mary was abused sexually by her mother's clients and physically by her parents. She had severe injuries from time to time, some of which were from domestic accidents or inflicted on her by her mother. On one occasion in 1960, her mother dropped her from a first-floor window. After she fell from the window, Mary suffered severe brain damage. The prefrontal cortex of her brain, the area related to controlled activities, and the capacity for decision-making, was damaged. Another horrible experience that her mother put her through in her early years was being sold by her mother to a mentally unstable elderly woman who had no children of her own. She stayed with her until her aunt retrieved her and returned her home. All the extended family members knew the gruesome condition of her upbringing, and whenever they offered to take custody of Mary, her mother would refuse. Mary's childhood wasn't marked by only violence and abuse. She also experienced grief at a very young age. She witnessed her childhood friend, who was just 5 years old, get run over and killed by a bus. Given all that had happened to her, it is not surprising that Mary had become a disturbed child at 10. Both at home and school, Mary showed numerous signs of unpredictable behavior. She was a violent child, which made other children away from her. She is known to have frequently fought with other children and attempted to strangle children on several occasions. One of her classmates from DeLaval Road Junior School, 1968, said that at some point, she and other classmates were accustomed to Mary's mood swings. When she was about to attack someone, she would stare intently at the person while shaking her head and making jerking movements. When this happened, her peers knew that she was about to become violent, taking that as their cue to run as fast as possible. The closest thing she had to a friend was the 13-year-old daughter of a next-door neighbor, Norma Bell. Although the girls shared the same surname, they were not related. They spent most of their time together, and they would later become accomplices in murder. On Saturday, 11 May 1968, the police found a confused, bleeding 3-year-old boy wandering on the streets. When he was asked how he got the big cut on his head, the boy informed them that he was playing with Mary and Norma in an abandoned air raid shelter, 7 feet off the ground, when one of them pushed him out the window. That same evening, 3 parents complained that Mary and Norma tried to strangle their children when they played together on the playground. When they were questioned, the girls denied the air raid shelter incident. They claimed that they found the boy bleeding on the floor after his fall. About the playground incident, Mary denied any knowledge of it, while Norma confessed that Mary had tried to strangle the girls on a few occasions. She said, Mary went to one of the girls and said, "What happens if you choke someone? Do they die?" Then Mary put both hands round the girl's throat and squeezed. The girl started to go purple. I told Mary to stop, but she wouldn't. Then she put her hands around Pauline's throat, and she started going purple as well. Another girl, Susan Cornish, came up, and Mary did the same thing to her. Due to their ages, the girls were let off with just a warning, and the case was dismissed. On May 25, 1968, a day before Mary's 11th birthday, Martin Brown, a 4-year-old, was found dead by strangulation in the upstairs bedroom of an abandoned house marked for demolition. 3 children discovered Brown's body at approximately 3:30 p.m. He was found with specks of blood and foam around his mouth, but there were no visible signs of violence on his body. The following day, Mary and Norma broke into a nursery in the neighborhood. Before escaping, they tore books, upturned desks, and smeared ink and poster paints on the walls. The next day, the nursery staff contacted local authorities, who discovered 4 separate notes which claimed responsibility for Martin Brown's murder. One of the notes read, "I murder so that I may come back." Again, this incident was considered a juvenile attempt to seek attention and was disregarded. On 31st July 1968, the body of Brian Howe, a 3-year-old, was discovered in a pile of rubble hours after he was declared missing by his family. The first policeman to arrive at the scene observed that a deliberate but feeble attempt had been made to conceal the body, which was covered in clumps of grass and weeds. The child's lips were blue, several bruises and scratches were evident on his neck, and a pair of broken scissors lay close to his feet. Numerous puncture wounds had been inflicted to the child's legs before death. Sections of his hair had been cut from his head. His genitals had been partially mutilated, and a shabby attempt had been made to carve the initial meters into his stomach. The relatively small amount of force used to murder the child led the coroner to conclude the murderer was another child. Fortunately for the neighborhood, this incident was considered worthy of investigation. The discovery of Brian Howe's body sparked a large-scale manhunt, and in a couple of days, 1,200 children were questioned about their whereabouts at the time of his murder. Mary and Norma were questioned, but they made contradictory statements. Eventually, they admitted to playing with Brian on the day of his death, but denied having seen him after lunchtime. Questioned further the following day, Mary tried to implicate an 8-year-old boy. She stated that she had seen him knitting the child. She also stated she remembered that the boy had been covered in grass and weeds, as if he had been rolling in a field, and had a small pair of scissors. She went on to say, "I saw him trying to cut a cat's tail off with the scissors, but there was something wrong with them. One leg was broken or bent." This self-incriminating statement convinced the Detective Chief Inspector, DCI, that Mary was the actual killer, as only the police knew about the broken scissors found at the crime scene. The local boy she named was quickly questioned and was discovered to have been at Newcastle International Airport on the afternoon of 31 July, with numerous witnesses able to support his parents' claims. The police continued their investigation, hoping to find conclusive evidence that placed Mary at the crime scene. It wasn't long before Norma came in to confess. At first, her confession implicated just Mary, but after pieces of her clothing, as well as Mary's, was found at the crime scene, she confessed that she started strangling Brian Howe, but she stopped, and Mary took over from her and mutilated the boy's body with scissors and a razor blade which they hid at the crime scene. Shortly after their arrest, on 7th August 1968, Mary and Norma underwent psychological evaluations, and after being evaluated by 4 psychiatrists, Mary was diagnosed with psychopathic personality disorder. Their trial for the murders of Martin Brown and Brian Howe was not until 4 months after their arrest. After a 9-day-long trial, Mary Bell was convicted of the manslaughter of both boys on the grounds of diminished responsibility, and Norma Bell was acquitted of all charges. Upon hearing the jury's verdicts, Mary burst into tears. Considering that her response to her arrest was "that's fine by me," her reaction improved significantly this time. After serving 12 years in prison, Mary was released from prison in May 1980 at 23. She was granted anonymity, including a new name, allowing her to start a new life elsewhere in the country under an assumed identity. Today she's 65 years old, and her current whereabouts are unknown and remain protected by the 2003 High Court order. According to Serenity, Mary Bell does not claim she was wrongly convicted and admits the abuse she suffered as a child does not excuse her crimes. And that's a wrap. Thank you for watching. Hit us up in the comment section and give us a thumbs up if you liked the video. Also, Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more videos,